Hello and welcome to La Sueur in English. Today we're recapping the latest King in the G episode that dropped this week right after UFC 265 and Ciryl Gane's performance. First thing first, and congratulations are in order. First to Ciryl, but also to his coach who just touched down in Paris an hour before the interview after spending the week in Vegas and 1 month away from his daughters. Coach Fernand starts off noting how this is kind of the final reward of a career that started long ago for him. Regarding the fight, he mentions how they did not come in stressed at all. They were bluntly aware of the situation and extremely concentrated, but not stressed. He also adds that the pressure felt heavy on him and the team. Even then, he felt that this pressure vanished really quickly, especially at a crucial moment last Saturday night, the walk-in. He mentions how he feared that the disapproval of the spectators could have affected them negatively, but it was instead a real deliverance. When they started walking and hearing the song that Ciryl had chosen himself, a Houston classic, Still Tippin' by Mike Jones, it brought some fun to the public who was probably thinking that this was Lewis's walkout song, and they started clapping. The fact that the public got so got by Cyryl's light trolling made it boo instead at 90%, and that made the team feel like it was a guard of honor instead. It didn't feel like a humiliation at all, it felt like a choreography almost. There were so many people booing, it was drowning the music out, and he looked around at the team and they all looked so happy it made him happy too. He even said it made him feel like he was in a show, like, the honor is ours, that's how the welcoming is here. They knew the difference in skills between Ciryl and Derek was legendary, but what they feared was staying frozen in there, not being able to get Ciryl into his actual level in flow state. But when he saw how Ciryl was dancing right before, they knew they were going to get the bon gamin. He wasn't in a state of absolute flow, but he was good and he delivered a good performance. Did he expect that kind of performance from Ciryl? He answers and says, quote, "Honestly, I cannot ever know how a fight's going to go before it started. I never know. A couple of hours before the fight, I was with Benjamin Sarfati and a colleague talking about which Ciryl we would get that night. If he comes in his flow state, we'll get a masterclass like we've never seen in the UFC before. The style difference between him and Lewis makes it so that he wanted to have some fun, some real fun. He could have gotten into his flow state and gotten real nasty and mean with it." End quote. He adds that technically, Ciryl is to him incredible. He uses the analogy of an electric car where you push a button and everything happens on its own perfectly. He feels like he's still going up in power, and when he finally reaches his flow state, he's going to represent something even bigger than the sport itself, as a superstar, having people expecting him to lose again and again as he gets better and keeps beating the competition. He was very happy with the performance, of course, yet he feels there are still some things that Ciryl can fix. Yet, he mentions how they trained that now famous back elbow hundreds of times, just like Cyryl's vicious head kick that he managed to land during the break against Lewis. He also notes how everyone knows Derek for what makes him such a scary contender. Yet in round 2, he says Ciryl didn't care about the backhand anymore. Ciryl and the team understood that the backhand was just a super powerful shot, but that just pairing with the arm was enough to make it feel like a baby slap. Now about Fernand himself. We've all seen the emotional video of Fernand receiving the belt in the cage. He mentions how the symbol of Ciryl putting the belt on him made him fight back tears hard. Touching on his motivations, he mentions being driven by injustice, and especially the ones you cannot talk about. This is related to his time with Francis, with all that's happened between them. When Fernand started having issues with Francis wasn't even at the gym anymore. What happened was that Francis was looking to move to the US, and Fernand was scoping gyms and calling friends abroad, such as DC himself, to see where he could train, but it's really hard to talk about it, because every time he says one word about it, people feel like he's bitter. He says his negative history with Francis is really only related to 2 incidents that happened in the gym, where he asked Francis to leave, but both of those incidents were resolved and didn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. The only thing he reproaches to Francis is not giving strength to the school that made him grow. He felt like Francis had a block in giving props to the team and helping it grow, unlike the other fighters. That's why he cried when Ciryl gave him the belt, because he didn't even expect it from his fighter. He emphasizes that he's had a nightmare for years that tells him that if Francis had followed the game plan against Stipe, he would have, quote, disinfected end quote, him in 2018. He doesn't appreciate how it feels like the narrative says that Francis only got the belt once he moved to the US, completely disregarding the years spent in Europe first. But he does give his props to Extreme Couture for making him a champion. He really was touched by Cyril's empathy because he didn't even ask for it. Because that was the realest thank you he could get. Talking about the next step for Cyril, he mentioned the camp had already started, with an emphasis on gaining mass and strength this time, while waiting for the actual bout date. Then they'll start working explosivity again. In passing, he also mentions Nusordin Imavov's title run and thinks he can become a champion. Of course, we're waiting for the bout versus Edmen Shahbazyan first. He also mentions that Benjamin Sarfati, who's the president of MMA Factory and a coach there, was the one that prepared Cyril's ground game before the fight. He also thinks that Francis is not scared of Cyril and Fernand at all, but he might be put on notice seeing someone finish a fighter he could not. About the reunification in France, of course he thinks it would be ideal, as that's where everything started for both Francis and Cyril. Plus, it would be a great opportunity for the sport in France to get some recognition, but he doesn't know how the UFC will make it work. He thinks if the bout happens before December, it will not be in France. Plus, the way rules are set in France, the commissions would never allow a fight like Lewis versus Gane because of the discrepancy in their MMA careers and number of fights. Overall, he's thinking the first fight will happen this year in America, while the rematch will be in Paris in 2022. He's saying the UFC's goal is to create the next Conor, and for that they need to bring those fighters to their own countries. Is he scared of Jon Jones? Apparently not. He thinks it will take time for fighters to understand the key to Cyril.